Okay, so welcome everyone. So happy to be learning with you again. This is the first week of Drisha's Spring's Month. Very excited for a lot of new classes, so I hope you saw our full schedule. This class is the Poetics of Mishnah, themes and structures, which is being taught by Rabbi Dr. Adina Sternberg and Rabbi Dr. Abraham Wolfish. Today we have Rabbanit Sternberg with us, but they're going to be switching each week. This class is a part of Drisha's ongoing Mishnah project dedicated to the memory of a great lover and student of Mishnah, Rivka Rosenwein, Zichronah Livracha. Just a few words about how we run the classes for anyone who's joining us for the first time or just needs a reminder. I'll be sending you an invitation to become a panelist. This way you'll be able to show us your smiling face if you wish, and you'll be able to unmute yourself when the instructor invites questions. Please stay muted when you're not actively speaking. I'll help you. I'll help put you back on mute after you're done speaking. And of course, when you need to speak again, you can press the unmute button again. You can feel free to also engage. If you prefer to engage in writing, you can write comments here if you're with us on Zoom in the chat box. Or if you're watching us live on Facebook, you're able to comment there as well, and I'll be monitoring that chat as well. Just a few words about this class. This course, while designed as a continuation of last semester course on the methodology of Mishnah study, got it this time. It stands on its own and will be accessible to those who did not participate in the previous course. So you'll still be able to enjoy this one regardless. The premise of this course is that close reading techniques such as keywords and literary structures enable the student of Mishnah to discern the ways in which apparently disparate units are woven together to produce a coherent text. In this course, we will focus on larger Mishnah units, examining how chapters are woven together to produce divisions, groups of chapters, and tractates, and develop the big ideas which the halakhic, aggadic materials seek to express. In accordance with the themes of the semester, we will focus on texts that address the issue of piety, and I hope I'm saying that right, and its interactions with other Jewish values. Again, this class is being taught, so for today, I'll just do a short introduction for Adina Sternberg. Rabbanit Sternberg holds a BA in Bible from Hebrew University and an MA and PhD in Talmud from Bar Ilan University. She studied at Lindenbaum, Migdal Oz, Matan, and other organizations. Rabbanit Sternberg has taught at a variety of institutions and is currently at Matan. And with that, I'll turn this to you, Rabbanit Sternberg.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I actually was going to make an introduction to the course, but Evie did it so nicely. So I'll start with a few words for those who weren't with us in the previous semester and are starting now, just to kind of get a feel of what we're going to do. We're going to be learning Mishnah. Now we have 2 points or 2 things we're going to focus on. One is methodology, meaning how giving us tools and paying attention to ways of learning the Mishnah. That's one thing. And the other thing is we're going to learn the Mishnah and listen to what the Mishnah has to tell us and what are the ideas that we're going to find when we use those tools that we just talked about. So I'm just going to point out before we go straight into the Mishnah that up until recent years, people learned Mishnah either to sort of get a general idea about different topics. They would see the Mishnah as a compilation of all kinds of halakhic details that more or less summarize a topic, and they would also use the Mishnah as a stepping stone or a springboard in order to get into the Gemara. You need to know what the Mishnah has to say so that you can get into the real serious and interesting discussions in the Gemara. And what we're doing in our course is going back to learn the Mishnah as a text on its own, to see the Mishnah as this wonderful, amazing project of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi and the people who work together with him, to put together all of the Jewish knowledge, but it's not only putting together, it's also sifting out, it's structuring it, it's putting it together in a specific way. And what we want to try to do is to go to these texts and try to see what the texts within themselves are telling us. But we're going to be using these literary tools. We're going to pay attention to structure. We're going to pay attention to the ways the details are brought to us, the wording. We're going to pay attention to the order in which things are brought, the language in which things are brought. We're going to pay attention to metaphors, to parallels, to intertextual connections. What we're trying to do is to see, one second, is to see how we can listen to the text and try to find deeper meaning in what seemingly is just a list of halakhic details. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. In terms of, because this was the first session and I didn't know who was coming or whatever, we didn't give you stuff to learn ahead of time, but hopefully in the next sessions we'll tell you ahead of time which text we're going to be learning. This time we're going to learn Mishnah of Shkalim. And I'll bring the text in front of you. I'll share a screen in just a second. But next week, Rabbi Dr. Wallfish will be teaching you. But in 2 weeks, when I teach you again, I will be teaching most of this month, except for next week. When I'll be teaching you again, we'll be learning Mishnah Beitza, and then I'll just ask you to go over the Mishnayot. You can use Sefaria and their translation, and that's a good way to get into the Mishnah. So I will try now to share screen. Second.
I see a question in the chat. Did you already see this question, Rabbanit Sternberg?
Yeah, which documents would you recommend using through the semester? If you want, you can open up the Sefaria text of the Mishnah if you would like. Okay. Those of you who like to have a book in your hand, so we're going to learn the first 2 chapters of Mishnah Shkalim. So if you prefer to have the text in front of your eyes, you can do that. But I'm also going to put the text in front of your eyes on the board. You see it as a presentation, right? It fills up your screen.
Could you possibly also put it in the chat so we can have something we can write on?
You're going to write on the presentation? Can you do that?
I don't know. If I could print it, then I could write on it.
Gloria, sorry.
I'm not sure it's going to come out well. I'll try next time to do it also as a Word document. Let me see if I can add it to the chat. Am I authorized to send things to the chat?
Yes. Are you able to? Let me know if there's an issue.
See if I can. No, I don't think this is going to work.
Let me see.
No.
Gloria, I think I will definitely have it for next week, but for today, I don't believe we do. Right, Rabbanit Sternberg?
Right. Yeah, I apologize. Okay. Okay, sorry. I want to try to get back and see if I can share my screen again and
if you would like to if you could like to send it to me by email, if you have something, we can do that, or if not, just next time.
Okay. So privately send me your email and then I'll try that.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Okay. Second. Okay, can you guys
just
see
sent it to you.
Okay, so everybody, if you just wait 1 second, maybe we'll be able to do this. 1 second. I apologize for those who are waiting.
Yes, all lowercase. In the meantime, I'm sending invitations just in case I missed someone to become a panelist. Of course, you can decline it again. You can also join as a panelist, but keep your video off. I'm just sending it just in case anyone wants to be able to verbally participate in class.
Evie, you could just post the Sefaria link. You could just post this,
Yeah.
the link to the Sefaria Mishnah page. And
Oh,
then
okay, sure.
Okay, if that helps you to write it on the Sefaria, so just Faria Mishnah Shkalim,
Okay.
chapter 1. Okay. Here, I'll even send the link myself. Okay. Fine. So apologize. Let's start again. So I'm sharing the screen. We're doing Mishnah Shkalim. I don't know how many of you have actually learned Mishnah Shkalim. It's not one of the more popular Mishnayot, especially since within Seder Moed, which talks about the holidays. So some people will learn Masechet Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, and some will learn Sukkah towards Sukkot and Yoma for Yom Kippur, etc. Shkalim doesn't have a holiday that it sort of sits on, so people don't really learn it. But I find it a fascinating Mishnah, and I'd like to share it with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn the first 2 chapters of Shkalim. And we're going to stop from time to time to notice the way it's structured, and through the structure and also through the motifs and the details, we're also going to try to figure out the ideas. Okay, and we're also going to explain the Mishnah and try to think about it while we're learning. So our first Mishnah. Okay, before we start the Mishnah, just a short introduction to the Masechet. The Masechet itself talks about the machatzita shekel, the money that people bring to the mikdash once a year. It's a kind of a tax, but it's a small tax, and we'll try to figure out what the basis for this tax is. Okay, so there are 2 sources that the Gemara talks about as a base for this tax. So the first source is in Shmot Lamed. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe le'emor. So God talked to Moshe. Ki tisa et rosh bnei Israel nifkudehem. When you take a census of the Israelite men according to their army enrollment, v'natnu ish kofer nafsho laHashem bifkodotam. Each shall pay Hashem a ransom for himself on being enrolled. V'lo yeh b'hem negef bifkodotam, that no plague may come upon them through their being enrolled. So when we're counting the people of Israel, taking a census, then people need to give a certain kind of ransom. What's a ransom? So this is the money that they need to give. Machatzita shekel b'shekel hakodesh, 20 gerah hashekel, machatzita shekel truma laHashem. So you need to give a donation or an offering to Hashem, which is half a shekel. כל העובר על הפקודים, מבין 20 שנה ומעלה ייתן תרומת השם. So men who are 20 years and older, they need to give this offering. העשיר לא ירבה והדל לא ימעיט ממחצית השקל, לתת את תרומת השם, לכפר על נפשותיכם. So it's an equal payment. The rich shall not pay more and the poor shall not pay less than this half a shekel when you give this offering in order to, as expiation or atonement for you. ולקחת את כסף הכיפורים מאת בני ישראל, ונתת אותו על עבודת אוהל מועד, והיה לבני ישראל זיכרון לפני השם לכפר על נפשותיכם. So you take this expiation money from the Israelites, assign it to the service of the tent of meeting, and it shall serve the Israelites as a reminder before Hashem, as explained, as expiation for your persons. So we have here a command that when we're counting the people, they need to give half a shekel, and that half a shekel will go for the service of the temple, right? It doesn't say here how often you need to do it. It doesn't say here that you need to count the people. It's only when you take a census of the people. It also sounds like people are doing this when they're going out to the army. In the translation, it's more apparent, right? Because it's an army enrollment. It even sounds, I heard once from Rav Meidan, that this is sort of a pre-atonement or expiation, because in war, people die. Lots of times people die in war. So this is a way of, sort of giving an offering to Hashem before, so that you kind of protect yourself in the war. But then it sounds like it's something to do with war or having a census or whatever. The next source that we have is in Bamidbar Kavchet, and it's talking about the korbanot of the Musafim. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, צב את בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם את קורבני לחמי לאישי, ריח ניחוחי תשמרו להקריבי במועדו. So command the Israelite people and say to them, be punctilious in presenting to me at stated times the offerings of food to me, as offerings by fire of pleasing odor to me. Okay, so we have these offerings that we need to give God on the right time, במועדו. ואמרת להם, זה אישה אשר תקריבו להשם, כבשים בני שנה תמימים, 2 ליום, עולה תמיד. So you have the ola offering, the burnt offering, that you need to give 2 times a day. And it continues with the offering of the ola, and then it talks about the offerings of Shabbat, and then it talks about the offerings of Rosh Chodesh. And then in verse 14, it says, ונזכהם חצי ההין יהיה לפר, ושלישית ההין לעיל, ורביעית ההין לכבש יין. So all kinds of added things that go with the sacrifices. Zot olat chodesh bechodsho lechodshei hashana. So this is an offering that we have for each month of the year. From here, the Chachamim understood that you have a yearly cycle of korbanot. So the korbanot of 1 year are separated from the korbanot of the Azir. When you take these 2 sources together, Chachamim understood that once a year, once a year, you gather money from the people to atone for people, money of expiation and offering, and you use that money that everyone gives exactly the same amount in order to buy sacrifices for the whole year. Okay? So it's kind of make sure you have a yearly census from which you can have money to worship in the temple. So these are our 2 sources that brought together give us this yearly tax of the Chatzi Shekel. And now we're going to go into the Mishnah and see exactly how it's done. So, Be'achad be'adar, mashmi'in al ashkalin ve'al kil'aim. So on the first day of Adar, the courts proclaims concerning the collection of the shkalim and about the kil'aim. When you have diverse kinds of crops in your field, that you need to take out whatever is growing and unwanted. ב-15 בו, קוראים את המגילה בכרכים. We remember that on the 15th of Adar, you read the Megillah. We're used to doing it on the 14th, but those cities that have a wall around them, they read it on the 15th. ומתקנים את הדרכים ואת הרחובות ואת מקוואות המים, ועושים כל צורכי הרבים ומציינים את הקברות ויוצאים אף על הכליים. So on the 15th of Adar, we have a whole list of things that we do. Besides reading the Megillah in the Krachim, you also repair the roads and the streets and the cisterns and do everything that's necessary for public welfare and mark the grave sites and go out for those kilaim, the diverse kinds of fruit crops. אמר רבי יהודה, בראשונה היו עוקרים ומשליכים לפניהן. In the beginning, they would take out the kila'ayim and just like throw it on the side of the field. משרבו עוברי עבירה, היו עוקרים ומשליכים על הדרכים. התקינו שיהיו מפקירים כל השדה כולה. So people who wouldn't care about the kilaim and wouldn't fix or take care of their fields on their own, they really like the idea that, the people from Beit Din come and do it for them, so they wouldn't take care of it. So in the end, Beit Din would say, okay, your whole field is taken away from you. It's declared ownerless. Right? So this is our first 2 Mishnayot. Let's continue to the next Mishnah. So So we talked about proclaiming, letting people know. It's very nice. It's like having it's like when you put something in your calendar, in your Google Calendar, and you need to tell them when to remind you, right? So, and the 1st of Adar, we're reminding people that they need to give this machatzit shekel. On the 15th, we said there are a whole list of things that we did, but here we find out another thing. B'chamisha asar bo, on the 15th of Adar, shulchanot hayu yoshvim b'medina. They would set up these tables that collect money in the Medina, meaning in the rest of the country, which is not Yerushalayim. B'esrim v'chamisha yeshvu b'mikdash. They would set up the tables in the mikdash. Misha yeshvu b'mikdash etchilu lemashken. Once they set up the tables to collect money in the mikdash, that's when they also began to seize collateral. Meaning, to force people to pay. Whoever doesn't pay, you take their collateral. Et mim mashkenim, Leviim veYisraelim, gerim ve'avadim meshuchorim, aval lo nashim ve'avadim uktanim. So who do you take the money from? Who do you take collateral from? Meaning you're forced to give this tax. You have Leviim, Levites and Israelites, and converts, and emancipated slaves, but not children, not women, and not slaves. So any child that his father started to give the money for him, even though he doesn't have to, then he has to continue. The court does not seize collateral from the priest because of ways of peace. Now, this is interesting, okay? Meaning it doesn't sound like halacha, it sounds more like, oh, we don't want to get in trouble. Okay, so what I want us to do is a second to look back at this whole piece of 3 Mishnayot and ask ourselves, what is the topic of these 3 Mishnayot? What's the structure? What is it talking about? So you can please, those of you who are willing to, write in the comments, what's the structure of this unit? What are we talking about? I kind of gave you a hint, but help me out here anyway. Okay, would you like to share with me in the chat? What do you notice? How does the Mishnah begin? How does it structure the beginning of Mishnah Shkalim?
Those of us who watch us live on Facebook, you can also comment there. And those of us who are with us here on Zoom can write in the chat box.
Okay, so we have a timetable for collecting shkalim, okay? And we said it's a calendar, right? So we have here, great. So Gloria, thank you. Emily, thank you. So we're talking about the timetable. The timetable, interestingly, adds in a few things into our timetables. It doesn't have to do with shkalim, right? So, but we have our when, right? We have a chad ba'adar, then we have a chamisha asar bo, then we have a 25 bo. So we have this timetable. And it's as Saul says here, Purim was just a convenient device to organize discussion, right? We're talking about things that happen on the 15th. Okay, let's just read Megillah also and sort of remind us of where we are in throughout the year. But maybe we'll ask ourselves later, why do we mention also the Megillah and the rest of the things in the list if we're talking about paying taxes to the Mikdash, right? So we have your other things that we've decided to put inside here, right? Fixing the streets and fixing the path and fixing the cisterns and taking care of the kilayim, which apparently really, really bugs them. Okay, but the Mishnah continues and it goes from the one, it starts talking about something else, et mime mashkenim, okay? So we're shifting here from the one to the who. Who's part of this story? After we talked about, I'd say, our timetable, when we just talk about it, to when we start setting up the tables, to when we start collecting. Now we're talking about who are we collecting from. Okay, Emily says, we look at the calendar, we see more than one appointment. It gives us a sense of our time. It also gives us a continuum to get ready right? Be'achad be'adar, people need to start of getting ready. I don't know about you, but for me, if I need to spend money on something, it helps me to get used to it and psychologically prepare myself for the expense, right? I need to sort of prepare for it, whether it's psychologically or physically or whatever. The calendar does give me something to look forward to and to prepare for, right? So now we moved from the when, we're moving to talk about the who. Okay, so who, and also here, just like in the timetable where we have, I'd say, different stages or different levels of commitment, right? We have the level of just listening, the level of when we're supposed to actually start giving the money, and the stage at which point they start taking it from us if we don't want it, right? They start taking the collateral. So also here we have those who are really obligated to give it, the Levi'im, the Israelim, the Gerim, whatever. And there's those who aren't obligated, which are the Nashim of Adim and Ktanim. And we have the Kohanim here, which we really need to figure out their story, because it says we're not taking the collateral, but not because we don't have to, but mipnei darchei shelo. So let's continue to our next Mishnah. Okay, here's the people, or who. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, here we're going to talk about the Kohanim. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, He'id ben Buchri beyavne. So, oh, I see that the translation here did not come through. I apologize. Okay, so you have to trust me here. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, He'id ben Buchri beyavne, kol kohen sheshokel eino chote. So Rabbi Yehuda says that Ben Buchri, in Yavne, had a testimony, which means he's giving, telling us of something that he knows about, that he's heard, that kol kohen sheshokel eino chote. So if a priest wants to give his shekel, shokel is give his shekel, is not a sinner. Amar lo Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. When Ben Buchri said this, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, "Lucky, you're wrong. Ela kol kohen she'eino shokel chote." A kohen that doesn't give the money, he's a sinner. He's wrong. Ela she'akohanim dorshim mikra ze la'atzmam. The kohanim, they have their own way of understanding the psukim. How do they understand it? It says, "V'chol minchat kohen kalil tiyeh lo te'acheh." Okay, so I'll just explain this a second. When a Israelite brings a mincha, which is an offering from the plants, from flour, from wheat. So part of it goes to the altar, and the rest is eaten by the Kohen as part of the atonement. But if a Kohen brings this kind of offering, the mincha, it's kalil, it's brought totally, it's a whole burnt offering. It can't be eaten because a Kohen cannot atone for another Kohen by eating his food. So a Kohen's food is totally burnt, and not another Kohen doesn't eat for him the food as part of the process of atonement. And so what does a Kohanim say? If in a regular mincha, that's the way it is, what are we going to do with minachot that come from the whole congregation? Ho'il ve'omer u'shtei halechem ve'lechem apanim shelanu he'ach ne'echalim. Some of the korbanot, of the offerings of the tzibur, of the people, need to be eaten by the kohanim, the omer offering and the shtei halechem offering, and therefore we have to eat it. If we have to eat it, it can't be ours. If it can't be ours, we can't be giving money to buy these offerings. We can't pay. Sorry, right? So here we have this certain kind of machloket between the Kohanim and the Chachamim, whether or not the Kohanim should be part of paying the money. Okay? We'll get back to that question in just a second, but here we have the next Mishnah, which talks about the next group of people. And here we find out something very interesting. אף על פי שאמרו אין ממשכנים נשים ועבדים וקטנים, אם שקלו מקבלים מידם. We said that we didn't take a collateral from women, slaves, and minors, but if they do contribute, you can accept it. The temple treasurers will accept it from them. הנוכרי והכותי ששקלו אין מקבלים מידם. If it's a Gentile or a Samaritan who contributes a shekel, we don't accept it from them. ואין מקבלים מידם, and we don't accept from them, קיני זבים וקיני זבות וקיני יולדות וחטאות והאשמות. All kinds of korbanot that come as something that you have to bring. You have to bring as part of an atonement. You have to bring as part of purification process. All of these things we do not accept from the Gentile and the Samaritan. Aval nedarim unedavot mekablim miyadam. If it's something that they offer from their free will, then we'll accept it from them. Ze haklal. Kol shenidar v'nidav mekablim miyadam. Anything that they can, it's a free will offering or a vow, something that they accept upon themselves, they will accept. Kol she'en nidar v'nidav en mekablim miyadam. If it's something that you have to bring, then we don't accept it from them. And then it brings us a pasuk. V'chenu meforash al yedei Ezra. Here we have it explicit by Ezra. Sheneemar lo lachem velanu livnot bait leEloheinu. They are not part of us to build a house for our God, and therefore they cannot give money for the support or the building or the upkeep of the house of our Lord. Okay, so now before we continue, I'd like you a moment to stop and think about these different groups, like who needs to bring and who doesn't need to bring. We have, on one hand, we're quite clear that that we have men who are Levites and Israelites and converts they need to bring. And we have people that we won't accept from them at all, the Samaritan and the Gentile. We have those who we want to take from, but they don't want to bring, which is the priests. And we have those, the women, the children, the slaves, that we won't force to give, but if they give, then we'll accept. Can you try to understand from this a kind of picture of what these shkalim mean to us? What does this tax mean in terms of avodat Hashem, in terms of avodat HaMikdash? How do you understand the difference in levels or stages or levels of commitment in terms of giving money to the Mikdash? If you guys want to write, you're welcome to write. If you want to speak, that's also an option. Okay, can we have like try to give us a certain kind of a definition? Who is in and who is out? Who does participate and who doesn't participate?
Well, it would seem basically that the Ezrach, anyone who is a Ben Yisrael, can participate. Those who are not Bnei Yisrael, they don't participate in the korbanot of the tzibur.
Okay.
Except
so you have Ben Israel and not Ben Israel, where Ben Israel, you're also kind of hinting to a Ben, like he has to be a male.
Yeah, well, but that's, we already accept that we have that category of women, children, and slaves. So, okay, we'll put that aside and say, okay, that's the way it is. But it's interesting that their willingness to participate is not to be discouraged, and which is it sounds like when God said to Moshe, don't turn away the women when they come to bring their mirrors for the Lord.
Okay. Yes, it's part. You're definitely part. Ruth Kirschenbaum says different levels of participation based on how much they'll benefit. Why do you think men will benefit more than women? Or men will benefit more than Kohanim? Interesting. Yes, so.
Oh, so if you could just unmute.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, there you go.
I guess I look at it as economic.
Meaning?
Noshim v'avodim v'ketanim don't have the resources generally. They don't have land, they don't have a job in that sense. But if they want to give, gesundheit, fine. And Kohanim are a world unto its own. They're not looking to the rabbis to figure out what they get to do. It's only after the fact that the rabbis are telling Kohanim.
Right,
here.
and the rabbis don't want to get in trouble with them. So mipnei dorchei shalom, you say, okay, you know what, forget it. We'll.
Right, but that tells you how far apart they are, right? Because rabbis aren't that interested in dorchei shalom except for husbands and wives and for Kohanim.
No, they also have Darchei Shalom also for Gentiles, but in different connections. They have Darchei Shalom in all kinds of things. Yes, Michael, but you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I'm curious because at least when I read this, part of it's for me underlies the tension between those who are commanded being on, one level. Yet what do you do with those who are part of the Jewish people but not commanded? And then finally it's also in a almost surprising way, perhaps, addressing the fact that non-Jews who are absolutely not commanded still can participate voluntarily within the context of the Beit HaMikdash. And so I think part of it here is playing out. One of the questions, I think, is what is the nature of the Beit HaMikdash itself? And those who can choose to participate in it, but navigating between insiders and outsiders at the same time, and this in-between category of Nashim, Avadim, and Ketanim. And I think Nashim becomes the real, from a certain outsider view, problematic category insofar as they are the same as men, except they're women. Ketanim and Avadim are of a different status by definition.
Could have said the same sentence, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what? You get what I'm saying. So I see that as something. It's almost, I think, I see that as an interesting thing the Mishnah is doing, reflecting precisely on that, and also still at the same time pointing out the centrality of the Beit HaMikdash, even though, of course, by the time the Mishnah is no longer there, but still doing that and leaving open some vision of the future of non-Jews still seeking Jerusalem.
Okay, so that's very interesting, trying to figure out where exactly things are. I want to try to sort of sum this up and try to think. You talked about the centrality of the Mikdash. I want to talk also about the centrality of a community and how you build a community. And we talked about two sources for the shkalim. One source for the shkalim was counting and protecting. And then we talked about those who go out to the army, right? And another point was contributing to the temple. So we have sort of like 2 points or two sources, different sources for this tax. There's a tax that protects people, but then it needs to protect certain people. And that there's a tax that contributes to the temple. And then we need to ask ourselves, who does the temple belong to, or who is part of the temple, right? So if we're talking about counting and protecting, we need grown males who go out to the army. But the priests, that's a good question, because maybe they need to be protected, or maybe they're counted. But on the other hand, the priests didn't go out to the army. So when the whole of Israel was counted, the priests actually weren't counted. So they consider themselves, we're a separate group. We're not exactly counted together with everybody else, just like women aren't, right? Okay. But if we're talking about contributing to the temple, women want to contribute to the temple and they want the temple to contribute to them. Children might want to be part of the temple. So we might not obligate them because they're not part of the counting system. They don't go out to the army, or as you said, maybe they don't have money, or we can't force them to do it. But if they want to be part, we definitely encourage it. On the other hand, the Gentiles are not nishta here. We don't need to count and protect them. They're not part, and we don't want them to be the ones building our temple. After it's built, after it's working, after it's doing what it needs to do, the Gentiles can take advantage of it and try to be part of what it can do for them, but they're not part of the infrastructure. In a sense, I think one of the main questions here, which we see through the question of the priests say to themselves, if we give money, we'll be eating our own korbanot. We can't do that. That's not halakhically valid. So we're not going to give them money. So what do Chachamim think? They say this isn't exactly a partnership where each and every one of us gives money, and then this korban I bought and that korban you bought and another korban somebody else bought. But when we give some money, we're creating something new, a new hope. We're creating not a partnership, but we're actually creating a community. Now, some people we can force to be part of the community, and some people they're sort of in the community out of free will. I actually think that the whole question of shkalim is very interesting in terms of women's role in halakha, because I think it gives us a very nice paradigm where we don't want to force, but we encourage and accept. Meaning, in a lot of things, there are just different halakhic places or issues where women aren't encouraged and they're actually discouraged. But I think that the Mishnayot of Shkalim give us a nice paradigm. We say, we want you to be part, and we're happy that you're part, but we don't want to force you. We want you to be there out of your own free will, and maybe, in a sense, this new whole that comes from the money of the community, some of it will be out of coercion, and some of it will be out of people's free will, and it creates something very beautiful together. Okay, so that was Zehu. We're going to continue in the Mishnayot about Zehu. We're going to go through these ones a little bit quickly. The next Mishnayot talk about bringing a premium or a kind of token when you bring in your money, which is sort of like to pay the expenses of the money collection and the money transportation, etc. And again, we have here's this difference between those who have to bring the money and those who want to bring the money. Who needs to give this premium or this token? Leviim, Israelim, Gerim, Avadim, Mishuchorim. All those who have to bring the money itself. So not if you're bringing the money, but we're not forcing you to. If somebody brings his money for a kohen, if someone's not bringing the shekel for himself, but he's bringing it for someone else who isn't obligated, he's also going to be patur for the premium. If he's bringing for himself and for his friend, if I bring 1 shekel for 2 people, do I give 2 tokens or 1 token? Rabbi Meir omer shnei kelbonot. Hanoten sela venotel shekel chayav shnei kelbonot. Also, if you bring a bigger coin and you take back a smaller coin, you also need to give the token for the money exchange. השוקל על ידי עני, על ידי שכנו ועל ידי בן עירו פטור. If someone donates for somebody else, for someone poor, for a neighbor, for someone in the city, he also doesn't need to bring the token. ואם הלוום חייב, if he's giving them the money, but they're supposed to pay him back, then he does need to give the token. And then we talks about brothers and partners, when do they need to give the token, when they don't. We're not going to get into that. Okay, but we can understand from here that if you don't have an obligation, you also don't have to pay the premium. So even if you are giving it out of your own free will, you do have a certain kind of discount. We're continuing to the next chapter. Okay, we're trying to gather all the information, then we'll have a little bit more discussion. מצרפים שקלים לדרכונות מפני מסוי הדרך. Okay, so they gather the money together, but then they transfer it to larger coins so that due to the burden of the way. There was once someone who had to pay a certain amount of money, was in a court. He was obligated to pay a certain amount of money. It really, really upset him. So he went and paid that money in tokens of dimes, right? So that's really annoying when somebody does it to you. But if all you have is these machatzit shekel, and now you need to bring them to the mikdash, it's very, very heavy. So you need to transfer it into bigger coins. כשם שהיו שופרות במקדש, כך היו שופרות במדינה. There were certain kind of like these, like a shofar where you can put in the money and it sort of slips down, slides down. So you could either give the money itself straight to the people collecting, or you can put it in the shofar. בני העיר ששלחו את שקליהם ונגנבו שעבדו. This is annoying. You collect all the money, and then those who take it to the mikdash, they lose it or it gets stolen. אם נתרמה התרומה, נשבעים לגזברים. ואם לאו, נשבעים לבני העיר, ובני העיר שוקלים תחתיהם. So let me just explain. There's a certain point where they collect all the money and they start taking out of it to buy the new korbanot. So if already the new money year started, then the money is already belongs to the mikdash. And then those who lost the money and those who got it stolen, they need to make an oath to the mikdash people that they were okay and that it's not their fault. And if not, if it didn't get to the time where the new money year starts, then the people who lost the money are actually the people of the city and they need to collect money again. If the money is found or given back, they're all holy, they all go to the mikdash. But they still need to pay again next year. They can't say, well, we paid twice or whatever. They still need to pay again next year. Okay, so what do we have here? We're turning to geography, right? We started with the when, we turned to the who, now we're in the where, right? We're starting on our way, and we're talking about things that happen on the way. Let's see the next Mishnah that talks about things that happen on the way. I gave my friend the money and said, oh, you're going to give your money? Please give my money also. The friend, instead of giving the money for the person who sent him, gave the money for himself, meaning he stole it. Once the new money year started and they started using the money to buy the korbanot, then he is guilty of misuse of a consecrated property. Hashoker, meaning so on the way to giving the money, he took it to himself. Hashoker, okay, so a similar concept is also if somebody takes the money from money that he had that was already consecrated, but we won't get into that. The next part is what I want to focus on, and this is the last part of the Mishnah, and it deals also with sort of kind of on the way. I told you that people need time to psychologically, mentally, physically, all kinds of things, get used to the idea that they need to bring the money and that they're going to need to get money for this shekel, machatzita shekel, whatever. And now the Mishnah tells us this, hamechanes ma'ot, okay, someone's gathering together small coins. Ve'amar harei elu lishikli. Imagine they have this little piggy bank or kupat tzedakah somewhere on the shelf in the living room or in the kitchen, and every once in a while it takes a little coin, 1 cent, 2 cents, and sticks in and says, okay, this is for when I need to pay my shekel. But when people do that, they don't always count exactly how much money they have in there. Bet Shammai omrim motara nedava. Whatever's left over goes for nedava, for a free will offering. Usually an olah or a shlamim, but something that you bring of your own free will. Uvet Hillel omrim motara chulin. Bet Hillel say whatever's left over is chulin, is non-sacred. You could use it for whatever you want. You had extra, great. Go buy yourself a candy. If what he says is not harei elu leshikli, it's that from here I will take my shekel. Shavim, they all agree. Shemutaran chulin, that whatever's left over is chulin. Elu lechatat, if someone collects money together and says this is for a chatat offering, shavin shemutar nedava. Okay, after you bought your chatat, you have extra money. You can't bring another chatat because chatat you bring because you have to bring, and now you don't have to because you already brought. So whatever's left over is sacred and goes to a free will offering. Shavimehen lechatat, and I'll bring from it for the chatat. Shavin, they all agree that shamutar chulin, whatever is left over, you didn't consecrate it. You said I'll bring from it. You didn't say I'll bring all of it, and therefore whatever's left is non-sacred. So what are we talking about? We're talking about people organizing, being organized, but they know that a lot of money at once is not something they'll be able to deal with. So they set aside every time. Now we need to deal with the leftovers. Let's go to the next Mishnah. In the next Mishnah, we try to explain the difference between someone setting aside money for the shekel and someone setting aside money for his chatat. I always wonder if people set aside the money for the chatat before they sinned or after they sinned, right? Is it, I know I'm going to sin, so let's put money on the side already? Or I know I sinned and now I need to start collecting so that next time I go to the mikdash, I'll bring my chatat. By the way, chatat doesn't have to be because you sinned. It can also be because you were impure and now you're going through a purification process. Okay. Amar Rabbi Shimon, ma ben shkelim lechatat? What's the difference between collecting money for your shekel for the mikdash or for a chatat, which is a sin offering? Shkelim yesh lahem kitzba, vechatat en la kitzba. Meaning, if I'm collecting money for a shekel, there is a certain amount I'm trying to get to. And once I go over that amount, I didn't plan to consecrate the money. Whereas when I'm collecting for a sin offering, there can be smaller sin offerings, bigger sin offerings. There isn't a certain limit, and therefore every coin I put in, I'm consecrating. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af l'shkalim enaim kitzba. So Rabbi Yehuda says, actually, the shkalim also don't have a set amount. Why? Sheksha'alu Yisrael min hagola, hayu shoklim dorkonot. In the beginning, they had to give more money. The dorkon we saw is a bigger amount in the shekel. Chazru lishkol slaim. At a certain point, they went back to the slaim, which is a smaller amount. Chazru lishkol tva'in. Then they went to a smaller amount, to a smaller coin. Uvikshu lishkol dinarim. They wanted to do also dinar, which is even smaller than the biblical machasita shekel that they didn't do. It's interesting. How come they went and paid less and less in time? Maybe because more and more people were paying. Maybe in the beginnings, there were really a small amount of people in Israel. They had to collect greater taxes. But once more and more people pay taxes, you can lower the taxes. Amar Rabbi Shimon, afal pichen yad kulan shava. Rabbi Shimon says it doesn't matter if during different historical times we paid more or we paid less. Everyone at a certain specific time had a limit. Now everybody's giving X. That's the whole part of the shekel, is that everybody is the same. We all give the same amount. אבל חטאת, זה מביא בסלע, וזה מביא בשתיים, וזה מביא בשלוש. חטאת, really, there isn't a limit. You can bring an animal with one selah or two selahs or three selahs. So therefore, all money that you put in your piggy bank should be consecrated. The Mishnah continues, and we're going to read this Mishnah and the next Mishnah, and we'll discuss it together. Motar shkalim chulin. So we just said money left over from the shkalim is chulin, non-consecrated. Motar asirita efa. If I collected money to bring the 10th of an efa, a mincha, mutar kanei zavim, kanei zavot, kanei yoldot, chataot, v'hashamot, mutrei nedava. All kinds of things that you need to bring as offerings. The money left over is a free will offering. This is a principle. Whatever you bring as a sin offering or a guilt offering, once you gave the offering, you can't bring another one. You've done. You've marked your check. You've checked your mark. Whatever. So the money is still consecrated, but you can't bring it for what you brought before. So you're bringing it as a free will offering because it still is consecrated. So now we're going to continue. Motar ola leola, motar mincha lamincha, motar shlamim lashlamim, motar pesach lashlamim. So if you wanted to bring an ola, you can bring another ola. So if you have extra money, bring another ola. You have extra money for mincha, you can bring another mincha. You have extra money from shlamim, which is a peace offering, you're allowed to bring another one. So if you have extra money, just go ahead and bring another one. Motar pesach is already tricky because if you collected money for your korban pesach, you have extra money, you're not going to bring another korban pesach. So bring shlamim, which is a peace offering. It's very similar to korban pesach. Motar nezirim la nezirim. Those of you who learned Daf Yomi, I don't know if there are any here, just started Masechet Nazir. One of the interesting things we find out is that people become Nazirites, but they didn't have money for bringing the offerings at the end of being a Nazirite. So other people would donate money for korbanot for the Nazirites. So if you donated money for korbanot for the Nazirites, so whatever's left over from that money will also go to the Nazirites. Motar nazir lenedava. But if a Nazir collects money for his sacrifices and he gave all his sacrifices, whatever's left is going for a free will offering. Motar aniim lanim. Motar ani, leoto ani. So whatever is left over from collecting for the poor people, go to poor people. If you collected for a specific poor person, it goes to that poor person. Motar shvuim, la shvuim. If you collect for redeeming captives, then it goes to the captives. Motar shuvui, lotzor shuvui, if you collected for a specific captive, it goes to that specific captive. Motar hametim lametim, if you collect money for burying the dead, whatever's left over is for continuing to bury dead whenever new people die. Mutar hamet, but if you collected to bury a certain specific dead person and you've already buried him, well, you can't bury him another time, right? So le'yorshav, you give it to those who inherit him. Rabbi Meir doesn't like the idea that we collected money in order to bury the dead, and now we're going to give the money to those who inherit him. So we're going to set it aside, and when Elijah comes, he'll tell us what to do. Rabbi Natan says you don't have to bury a person twice, but you can build something on top of his grave, and you can invest in it more money. You have extra money, make it more pretty. Okay, so what did we have here? I put all these last Mishnayot together. You can see the words here. I'd say they jump out at you, but that's just because I did it that way. But you can see again and again the same words come together, bring together Mishnah Daled, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah Vav, and they're all talking about. They're all talking about the leftovers, right? We can say this whole unit wants to tell us what do we do when we have leftover money. Whatever we're collecting for, what do we do with the leftovers, right? But there's something very interesting here. Because we have here what I like to call tangents. Some people call them incidental topics. We've connected here the topic of shkalim with two other topics, right? We had the tax of the shkalim, but we've added in parallel worlds. What are the parallel worlds that the Mishnah introduces here? Okay, give me two parallel worlds that the Mishnah decides to connect to the world of shkalim. You can write, you can say.
Oh, tzedakah.
We have tzedakah, right?
Korbanot.
And korban, right? So we have here the idea of equality. We saw that. We have the parallel worlds. What are the parallel worlds that we have here? We have here, on one hand, the world of Kedusha and Korbanot, and the world of Tzedakah. Now, what I want us to notice is try to see how things are coming here together. We started with our with the sources to bringing the money, right? So one source of bringing the money is that we have here a tzibur. We have here people who are going out to war together, or we're afraid that they're going to be smitten in one way or another. And we take all the people that are counted and they need to atone for themselves. That's one way of looking at the shkalim. Another way of looking at the shkalim is this is the ways that we provide for the korbanot in the mikdash. Now, this is like a sort of thing that we've been playing with throughout these two chapters. The idea that on one hand, people can't eat their own korbanot. So maybe the priest won't need to bring it. Or the priest also part of the tzibur, not part of the tzibur. The women, we don't force them to be part of the tzibur, but they are part. They do want to be part. They can become part. So we have these two aspects that have sort of been playing into our considerations this whole time. Now,
Did we lose the sound?
Yeah, it's frozen for me.
Rabbanit and Sternberg, we can't hear you now. I know you had a little concern in the beginning. Okay, she is probably restarting and will come right back in. I'm so sorry. Okay. Oh, there. I think Rabbanit Sternberg. Oh, she's connecting to the audio. Okay, we'll be able to hear her in just a moment. Rabbanit Sternberg, can you hear us? Still not. Okay, I'm going to take care of this. Thank you for
There, she was just there. She's back.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I don't know why that just got lost. I have no idea. Okay, so let me just finish the few finishing sentences. What I was trying to say is that the Mishnah is giving us these two parallels. One, on one hand, to the world of korbanot, because that is, I guess, more intuitive. because the shkalim go to the korbanot. But the Mishnah is introducing here something more. The Mishnah is saying, you know what? The shkalim is not only parallel to korbanot. The shkalim are also parallel to tzedakah. Now, why is the Mishnah telling us it's a shkalim are parallel to tzedakah? We can give this we can give this several explanations. One explanation is, someone here mentioned before that we don't have a mikdash anymore. A lot of these things are, you can say, irrelevant to our times. Even in the times of the Mishnah, it wasn't very relevant. It was more like history. But once the Mishnah says, yeah, but shkalim is parallel to tzedakah, it gives us a whole new way or another way of donating, of giving from ourselves to God. Just instead of giving it to God himself, we're giving it to our neighbor, to the person who needs our help. Okay, so that gives us a way of taking the Mishnah of shkalim and implementing it in our lives and having still a way of donating and atoning and using our money for sacred purposes. But I think it's more than that. I think the Mishnah is trying to tell us that the shkalim is not only for the mikdash to work. The shkalim is also a way of building a community where every person, there's some people who have to give, but they'll give a specific tax. And there are people who can decide to be part of the community. We're not going to force them, but they can, and we encourage, and we're all for it. And we like also the idea of being part of a community out of free will. But also building a community is remembering the poor people inside. So that's why the Mishnah will also remind us that you can, what can you do? You can give the shekel for your poor neighbor. Right? You can give the shekel for a woman, for somebody else, but remember also the option that maybe the poor person can't give his tax, you can give it for him. And that way you'll be giving the money for the korbanot, but you'll also be taking care of your neighbor. So and if we return back to our to the first Mishnah also talked about, okay, one second. The first Mishnah, I apologize, I'm not doing this as a PowerPoint thing, but just so you see the beginning. The first Mishnah reminded us that what do you do on the 15th of the month? On the 15th of the month, you tell people about the Mishnayot, but you also start working on things that the tzibur needs. You also start taking care of what the public needs, because the mikdash is not just thinking about God. The mikdash is here to serve the community, is part of defining the public. And you can do this by giving to God, but also to giving to your neighbor. So here's a Mishnah, just by putting two topics together and comparing between them and keeping on, reminding us of the poor person and the public throughout these two chapters. The Mishnah is telling us this is something you should think of when you're thinking of giving and donating to God. Remember also your neighbor and your community, because that is part of the way that we connect to God. So that's it for today. I apologize for some of the glitches we had here, but be happy to see you in the coming weeks.
Can I just say one thing? This is a technical thing. First of all, thank you. I personally found the charts you made really difficult to read on a computer screen. In other words, they were a little over busy. I don't know about other people. I'd be interested if other people had the same experience. If it's
Go
just
back
me,
to regular
forget it.
Word documents.
Well, I know.
Go back to regular.
What other people think as well. Don't take it just based on me. If it was more difficult for other people, I don't know if they want to chime in.
I think maybe the background was a little overwhelming over the text.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. I'll try
The
to go back
charts
to
are great.
Word
It's just,
document.
I think the background issue. That's
Okay, we'll
Okay.
keep them in mind.
Thank
Any other questions or comments before we close the session today?
Thank you so much. This is a beautiful putting together of this. Just thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for joining and learning with us, and thank you so much to Rabbanit Sternberg for always bringing really interesting lessons. Again, thanks everyone for being part of our learning community here at Drisha. Just a couple announcements. So as Spring Zman is just getting a kickoff this week, There is plenty of time to still sign up for more classes, so we hope to see you in more of them. We have our private Talmud shiur with Dr. Shana Strauch-Sheik, Yiddish translation workshop with Mr. Daniel Kraft, and classes on the Nazir, on the Rav Shagar, and much more. You can learn about all these classes and more on our website, drisha.org. And again, thank you so much for joining our class today. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Lehitraot.